everyone! Today we will talk about the first 13 colonies of the United States. In this video, we will cover the Southern Colonies, while the New England and Middle Colonies we will cover in later videos. A group of English investors who sought to establish profitable colonies in the New World founded the Virginia Company, with the goal of finding new trade routes, acquiring wealth, and promoting English interests overseas. You will mostly encounter the word joint stock company instead, which basically means a company started by multiple investors who share ownership in the company. The Virginia Company's investors hoped to find valuable resources like gold and silver, which they believed would bring them great wealth. They also aimed to establish a permanent settlement to expand English influence and challenge the dominance of other European powers in the New World. To find the land for the colony, the Virginia Company sent 3 ships, the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery, led by Captain Christopher Newport. They sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and arrived at what is now Jamestown, Virginia, in May 1607. This location was easily defensible and had access to navigable waterways, allowing for trade and transportation. Upon their arrival, the colonists were surprised to find people already living in the area. On the other hand, the Native Americans had mixed reactions. Some tribes were curious and initially friendly, while others were cautious or showed hostility. Many helped them provide food and resources. However, as the colonists expanded their settlement and demanded more land, conflicts arose between the colonists and Native Americans and eventually led to violence. In addition to this, the colonists unknowingly carried pathogens and germs, which were then introduced to the Native American population. This happened through direct contact, such as trade or conflicts, as well as through the exchange of goods and resources. The lack of immunity among the Native Americans made them more vulnerable to these new diseases, leading to many deaths. As a result of these diseases, many colonists also died, weakening the population and making it difficult to establish a stable and thriving colony. This posed a major challenge to their survival and success of the Jamestown colony. To overcome these challenges, the colonists, with the aid of Native Americans, turned to tobacco cultivation, which had a high demand in Europe. The colonists discovered that tobacco could be grown successfully in the fertile soil and climate for the colonies, allowing them to cultivate in large quantities. The European market eagerly purchased the tobacco, providing the colonists with a profitable source of income. They used the profits to establish Virginia, and Jamestown became the first permanent English colony. To meet the growing demand for field workers, Virginians relied on indentured servants. These were individuals who agreed to work for a set period of time, usually around 4 to 7 years, in exchange for the passage to the colonies in order to improve their future prospects and escape difficult circumstances in their home countries. This allowed the colonists to acquire labor without incurring the high costs associated with purchasing enslaved individuals. To encourage immigration to the colonies and increase the population, the headright system was created. Under this system, individuals who paid for their own or another person's passage to the colonies were granted 50 acres of land. This system helped attract indentured servants who could potentially gain land and economic independence after completing their indenture. In 1676, Bacon's Rebellion, a rebellion led by Nathaniel Bacon, was started. He started it because he was frustrated with the colonial government's lack of protection against Native American attacks. Bacon wanted the government to take more aggressive action. The rebellion was eventually suppressed, and Bacon died of illness. In the long run, the rebellion had several consequences. One of them was that it led to a shift in labor from indentured servants to enslaved labor. The colonists started to prefer enslaved labor because they believed it would be more controlled and less likely to rebel. In the late 17th century, African slaves were introduced to Virginia. As the labor demands grew, colonists turned to African slaves as a more permanent and exploitable source of labor compared to indentured servants. The preference for African slaves was influenced by factors such as the perception of their physical strength, the belief in their ability to withstand harsh conditions, and the profitability of the slave trade. In 1619, the House of Burgesses was established by the colonists in Virginia. It was named after the English term burgess, which means a representative or elected official. The House of Burgesses was created as a way for the colonists to have a voice in the decision-making process and to govern themselves. This paved the way for the idea of self-government. However, for the Native Americans, the establishment of the House of Burgesses led to increased encroachment on their lands and further strained relationships between the two groups. In the 18th century, the British adopted a policy of salutary neglect. It was a hands-off approach where the British government relaxed its enforcement of colonial trade laws. This policy was adopted due to a combination of factors, including distance, limited resources, and a focus on other priorities. Salutary neglect allowed the colonies to develop their own economies and break some rules, but as long as the colonies were making money. In 1634, Maryland was founded by Lord Baltimore as a proprietary colony, meaning he was granted complete governing rights and authority by the English monarchy. He sought to create a haven for English Catholics in the New World. The colony was discovered through exploration and settlement efforts led by Lord Baltimore and his followers. In 1633, the province of Carolina, that consisted of all or parts of present-day Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and the Bahamas, was established as a proprietary colony granted by King Charles II to 8 English nobles known as the Lords Proprietors. The province of Carolina was envisioned as a single colony, but it eventually split due to differences in the settlement patterns and governance. They eventually became royal colonies, meaning they were under the direct control of the English monarchy. The king or queen appointed a governor to oversee the colony and make decisions on behalf of the crown. In 1733, Georgia was founded by James Oglethorpe as a buffer colony, meaning as a protective barrier between two conflicting regions, in this case between the British colonies and the Spanish territories. They sent prisoners and debtors to this colony to alleviate overcrowding in British prisoners. And that's a wrap! Those were all the important details of Southern Colonies of the US. To learn about the New England and Middle Colonies, head over to my other videos. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more fascinating knowledge. Thank you for watching Studimation, animated educational videos.